Film Club.
Thank you very much for joining us for another episode of Film Club. I am one of your hosts, Andy Harrison. With me, as always, it's Andy Donaldson.
Hello, as always.
Every week in Film Club, Andy, we invite those lovely people at home to watch a film with us. And this week, we invited them to watch a Christopher Nolan classic with Insomnia.
His third film. It was released before Batman Begins. Insomnia features Al Pacino, who is a detective, got up to Alaska with his partner to work on a case that they need a bit of hand with. And they work through this case, and slowly you find a bit more about his life and his kind of dark history, or potentially dark history. Insomnia comes about with the fact that Alaska, at least when he's there at the time, is just 100% daylight. And he can't sleep that well. And the more that this film progresses, the more that these insomnia affects him and clouds his judgment. The thing I really enjoyed or potentially most loved about this film is the landscape. It's not often you see the it's not often you see the kind of Alaska landscape or just kind of Northern America, Canada, or the kind of Siberian, obviously the other side of the world, landscapes that often. And that kind of grueling, desolate wasteland that also has life to it. It reminded me an awful lot of Fargo, you know, the kind of snippets you get through Fargo.
Yeah,
and I was really, really enjoying, like, there's a really perfect scene where he's going across and you can see the glacier in the background, this kind of light blue. And I was thinking, oh my God, that looks amazing.
The two cabins that Robin Williams uses, as well as the log pond that turns up halfway through and they have the chase sequence across it.
That's what a chase that is, by the way.
It's photographed absolutely gorgeously by Wally PFISTER, who was, like, for Nolan, a long-time collaborator.
Well, this is interesting. When I saw it as Wally PFISTER, I was thinking, oh, he didn't really work with him. There's a point, I think it was Interstellar, that he changed his cinematographer.
Wally PFISTER wanted to try directing, so he went and did what's that film called?
It was called Transcendence. It wasn't amazing.
Yeah, so he wanted to go and try directing, which meant that he wasn't available for Interstellar, and that's how he met HOYTEMA, who he's been working with since.
I was also quite a big fan of the lack of audio, like the absence, which obviously helped the environment there.
Here, he hasn't yet met Hans Zimmer, and Hans Zimmer would
David
become
Julian that did this. Yeah.
Hans Zimmer would become a very core component of what Christopher Nolan's style kind of is. You know, that working relationship becomes vital to Christopher Nolan going forward. The music here isn't bad at all, but it doesn't command the way that a Zimmer piece kind of would. And Nolan often lets Hans Zimmer's music command elements of his film. Whereas here, he's not relying on the music in the same way. It becomes a bit more dreamy. You spend a lot of this film sort of like floating through the scenes and sort of like wandering through it in this sort of hazy fashion. You actually, before we started recording this, you described this film as a perfect Sunday evening film.
Evening film, yep.
And it is, because this film, like, it's kind of ironic given the subject matter, but it's a sort of easy, fun watch. It doesn't really ask a lot of you. You just kind of sit back, you relax, and you get into this sort of calming flow of the film.
The new Cineworld ad from Andy Harrison and everyone. So you got Pacino, you got Robin Williams, you got Hilary Swank. You're going to have some great performances. I think that Pacino, you know, I mentioned this before when I did Pacinoisms. You know, he's kind of like loud, outbursty. It's quite nice to see him hold back and be a bit more reserved, trying to deal with his own, his own issues, his own morals, his own like dark mind and where it's going, especially with the insomnia. And by the way, absolute credit to the makeup department for making him look as high as he did. There's some absolute great scenes, like in the bar scene and later on where he's talking to the hotel manager.
He sells it really well. In the opening, he's got this like aggressive forward approach, and the script really supports this as well, because he's really taking control of the investigation. And then obviously as he kind of can't anymore, and he has to manipulate things from the background, and he wants the rest of them to stumble onto information. And I love the little scenes where like he has to try and work his way around something in a very subtle manner, and Al Pacino does a great job at this. Like the scene where he's stuck in the room with Robin Williams, but they're about to send a search warrant over to that guy's house, and he's like, I need to get there first, and the guy won't let him leave. So what he does is he causes that scene so that he has a reason to leave and then rushes over there. He's very good at sort of like making people think that they've made the decision, and actually he's the one who's pulling those strings in the background.
So he's great. And then we move on to, as mentioned, Hilary Swank. I think she's, other than the kind of novice, the rookie, the kind of like really enthusiastic role she has, there's also a really cool part where she reacts really well with her face. And I was sorry, okay, let me elaborate. So it's just those parts where she's like kind of sussing everything together. Obviously, you have that quite prominent in detective films, but normally it's kind of there's a scene to kind of talk about their mind process. But with her, you can see exactly what she's thinking that the audience already knows with regards to Pacino and his, you know, is he actually is he the culprit here, let's say. And you can see that just those little scenes that build up together and just the way that she, without much dialogue, without much action, she's able to make you believe that what she believes.
There's just some awkward dialogue moments with her that the other cast don't have. She's also up against like Al Pacino and Robin Williams.
It's not often you see Robin Williams as the villain. I like seeing Robin Williams take on a darker role because, you know, he's the guy we all grew up with the kind of voice, and he makes you talk like this, and he makes you laugh, ha ha, like this. But no, Robin Williams is a fucking killer. Robin Williams describes how he is talking to the girl, then suddenly he's like, so I slapped her. I made sure she wasn't talking like this. To see that come from his mouth.
Rough. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. See that, and also credit to Nolan for those little edits and switching between her. Like that's quite psychologically like horrifying.
The calculation that's going on.
Oh man.
But also the way in which he's convinced himself that he's correct.
Oh yeah, and it's so well done.
He's told himself that it was just an accident, and he's told himself that because Al Pacino's also had an accident that they are one and the same, and because because he's a police officer and he's a good police officer for the most part, that means he's also okay.
Pacino says at the start of the film, he says he cut the nails off. Normally people want to cut the bodies and they react and they're like, oh no, what do I do? And that's Williams at the end actually when he does that. He's worried, he's being brash, he doesn't really know what to do next, where it's not calculated anymore. Really, 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 really well done by Williams. And then obviously that end scene, it's just
delightful sort of game of chess that's going on all the time as well, with like the planting of the gun, but then he knows the gun's been planted, so he plants it somewhere else and he can't find it when he goes to get, like, it's such this wonderful sort of like one-upsmanship of like the guy who has the experience versus the guy who is immensely well researched. Do you know what I learned this time round watching it?
I've only seen it the once, so go on.
It's a remake.
Oh right, yeah, I read that actually after.
Absolutely no idea that this was a remake until getting ready for this. And so it turns out it's a remake of a 1997 film called Insomnia, directed by a guy called Erik Skjoldbjerg, starring Stellan Skarsgård.
Oh really? Yeah, it's a Norwegian film, isn't it?
Almost immediately after watching Insomnia, I went and watched Insomnia. In the original, Stellan Skarsgård is a bit more like, he's a bit more to blame for his own actions. There's small alterations, like he gets sexually aggressive a couple of times in the film. The dog that in Nolan's version that Pacino shoots, the corpse, in the original, it's a live dog that he goes and kind of like tricks into coming up to him. And then
that's rough. So he's a darker character overall.
Yeah, and then at the end, he's not kind of like absolved of his sins by, you know, sacrificing his life heroically. He kind of gets to live with this awkwardly grim moral ambiguity that he's been dragged into. One thing before we finish up here, what does this not have that drives me up the wall about Nolan films?
Shit dialogue.
Yeah, the dialogue's really good in this.
Is this before Jonathan Nolan, by the way?
Well, this is, actually, funny enough, although apparently Nolan had some edits on the final draft of the script, he didn't write it. He's not credited as a writer. Mm-hmm. I'm starting to get suspicious about the Nolans and their dialogue, but this was excellent. Great dialogue here was great.
I'm so glad we don't have another Lazarus moment. Fuck me.
I mean, do you know what? It's not a Nolan film that's going to top my list of Nolan films.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's still totally solid and a really just, you know, fun, casual, easy watch. But anyway, there is Insomnia. You can let us know in the comments below what you thought of Insomnia, or you can hit Andy and I up on Twitter, as always. But we are going to be back once again next week, where we're going to take a look at another film that came out at the same time and also had a Robin Williams performance in it.
Yep,
we're going to take a look at 1 Hour Photo.
Now, honestly, watch this. It's good.
So until then, get watching.